So last week, we talked about Jesus' interaction with the Canaanite woman, and Lisa was wondering at the beginning of the class, well, maybe Jesus is just having a bad day. And I suggested that, well, there's a way to look at it, that it was very intentional on his part and it wasn't like he was just having a bad day. But I totally agree with Jesus having bad days. So actually, I thought, let's look at some verses, some incidents where I think Jesus is having a bad day. And this touches on how we see Jesus overall, right? So, you know, the faith we confess is that Jesus was fully God and fully man. But you know how that usually works out? Fully God and kind of human.
And Superman.
Yeah, and Superman. Not a genuine human being experiencing everything that we experience. It kind of works out that we minimize the humanity and we emphasize the divinity, and so that's kind of where our imagination of how we think of Jesus comes from. But I wanted to start with this statement in Matthew 13, because I want to explore this a little bit and then look at some of his bad days. But I got to lay this groundwork so I don't sound like a heretic. What do you mean Jesus had a bad day? Okay. So Matthew 13, Jesus is in his hometown, verse 55. Here's what the people say. Is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas, and his sisters? Are they not all with us? Where did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household.
What did he mean by all these things? Like his family, or was there something else?
In 56?
Yeah. Where did he get all these things?
Well, I think these things, see, I didn't read verse 54. The first question is, where did this man get this wisdom and these extraordinary powers that are happening through him? Now, they don't think he's doing it himself. That would be anathema to a Jew to think that some human being can do these things. They would have understood it as, well, this must be a prophet. God is working through this person. But they take offense at him because they don't imagine Jesus could possibly be one of those prophets. That's why Jesus says a prophet is not without honor except when he goes home. Because everyone at home knows him and thinks, nah, he's nobody special, right? That's exactly what they were thinking of Jesus, which tells us something about Jesus' childhood. What does it tell us about Jesus' childhood?
It's normal.
Pretty normal.
It was pretty normal. No one said, well, that's that strange kid who was always doing crazy stuff when he was 8 and 9 and 15. And we always knew he would turn out to be someone really extraordinary. Everyone's like, isn't that just the kid from down the block? And we know his family, we know his mom and dad. Where does he come off acting like he's a prophet and so wise, right? So
Even the last verse, he didn't do many miracles because they're going to believe he was kind of upset with them.
Yeah, it's like, and a side note that I like to emphasize, because again, the whole subject of miracles is problematic because we use that word in English, and in English a miracle means the suspending of natural order and doing something supernatural. There is no parallel term in Greek for that English term. In Greek, there are 3 words that are used that we translate miracle, and none of them mean the suspension of the natural order of things to do something supernatural. The words are wonder, which is the effect it has on people. If something was a wonder, which means you're like, huh? Right? A power, a demonstration of a power, right? Or the third word, sign.
Say it again.
Sign. So in the Greek, the words that are used are either wonder, sign, or power. And what we do is translate the miracles and then think from a more scientific kind of worldview that the world runs according to natural law and natural order, and a miracle is when that is suspended and something extraordinary happens. Ancient peoples would not have thought that way. That's why they had no term like that. Because they didn't see the world running according to some sort of mechanism of natural order in which the gods didn't involve themselves. That's a modern construct, right? We've so analyzed how things happen that we think, well, they happen according to these processes, and if something extraordinary happens, God must have suspended the processes. So that's why I think our language of miracles is not helpful. I'm not at all denying that there weren't powers and wonders and signs happening. I'm just saying the mentality's different. And so I saw this in Tanzania because the people that I was working with in Tanzania, my brothers and sisters, did not think about the world in nearly the scientific, secular, modern way I did. And for them, the world was full of powers and signs and wonders. And so the remark was made once that they had noted that when I came to their village, it always seemed to rain afterwards. They were making a connection. I, of course, know how the process of rain works. There's evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. I know it's a purely natural phenomenon, but for them, it's a sacred phenomenon, right? And the thing was, when I read the New Testament, I got to remember those people are thinking much more like my Tanzanian brothers and sisters, right? They don't see the world as governed by laws and mechanisms. They see it as infused with the presence of God, and everything is the act of God. Some of them he does very frequently, some he does less frequently, but they're all just as much his acts. I actually like their worldview better. Not that I'm going to ignore the processes of what we know, but the idea that God is somehow uninvolved and only occasionally becomes involved, I think is not the way God is interacting. He is with us always. He is involved in everything. Even in what we would call natural processes are still being sustained by God. Even if we've figured out what's going on, that doesn't mean God's not involved, right? So yeah, a couple times miracles come up here in this reading, and that can trip us up. That's not what they were thinking, right? But yeah, Jesus couldn't do anything a sign that pointed them towards God, or he couldn't do something that caused them to wonder. Why wouldn't they wonder? Because they were despising him. And this is Joseph's son, regular kid. So here's the problem. In short, the people in his day had no problem believing Jesus was a human being. It was incredibly difficult to think he was anything more than just an ordinary human being. And if you've grown up in the church, you have the opposite problem. You have no problem believing Jesus is the Son of God, divine, and all that kind of stuff. You have real trouble trying to think he was actually a human being. Right? So we have the opposite problem today than they would have had. Does that make sense? So what I want to do.
Is that, you always use that term, but is that because we're in the postmodern?
No, it's because we've gotten far enough removed so that there are actually examples of gospels that were never recognized by the churches as canonical. And they tell these miraculous stories about Jesus as a child. And they're really kind of horrific. I'll tell you why. Oh, I can pull some out sometime. We could read them. But in some ways they're hilarious. But they imagine the child Jesus has all the power of God and none of the moral guidance. Because they're going to have, already 100, 200 years after Jesus, they've stopped thinking about him as a real human being. And so actually one of the stories is, some playmate of Jesus offends him and he strikes him dead. And the parents of the villagers are coming to Joseph and Mary saying, "Restrain your child, for he killeth our children." In their imagination, they were thinking, well, Jesus is God, and so 4-year-old Jesus is God, and he has all the power of God, but none of the wisdom of how to use it. That was their imagination. But see, that imagination's already there in the 200s, right? So it's not a modern thing, it's that people who walked around with him, who ate with him, who saw him grow up, their testimony is, I would have never thought he would have been anybody, right? Which tells you he wasn't extremely different. He was an ordinary young man, an ordinary child.
You probably said some foolish things, so therefore,
Yeah, because I'm going to affirm, I'm absolutely going to affirm Hebrews 4:15. He was tempted in all ways like as we are yet without sin. I am not suggesting sin like a rebellion against his father. But to be incorrect on some matter is not the same as a sin. I've heard preachers say, you know, the child, he must have been in school, got every answer right. No. Being the Son of God doesn't mean he understands all mathematics, right? No, he's a child that Luke even says grew in wisdom and stature. And if he grew in wisdom and stature, grew physically in stature, but grew wisdom in his mind, then there was things he didn't know. And he went through the typical human process of learning and growing. And his mother taught him things, and other people taught him things. So, you know, I'm not suggesting Jesus isn't divine. I'm just saying we tend not to appreciate that he was human. So then we think that he had extraordinary advantages over us. And then we think the whole idea of I should imitate him is patently impossible. You follow the reasoning? Right?
So what this keeps popping in my mind is this Far Side cartoon of Moses as a child partying in a bowl of water. You know, and I can imagine, you know, the similar thing with Jesus, right?
Right, exactly. That's the sort of thing, is it becomes possible to imagine not a normal human child, but
but there's an example of him not being a normal child. I mean, what kid is so lost in the temple that his parents have gone 2 days down the road? I mean, isn't that Jesus, the kid that, you know, they
Yeah, that-
tracked for 2 days to go get out?
that's 12-year-old, there's a 12, you don't know any 12-year-olds who kind of a little irresponsible and don't exactly be where mom and dad think they should be. Now, what is extraordinary is he's deeply interested in, it's his first time to go to Jerusalem. He's now a child of the law. That's what bar mitzvah means. He's become a child of the law. So he's now considered able, he's no longer a child in terms of the law, and he can go to Passover, and he goes for the first time. And he wants to learn, because it says he's answering and he's asking questions, if you read Luke's account. So sometimes it's portrayed as if he's asking questions to stump all the scholars, like he already knows everything. Maybe he's asking real questions. Maybe questions like, so what is the Messiah supposed to do? Because his mom's told him, you're the special one. But I think the big question in his mind is, what does that mean? And what can his mom tell him that means? Very little. I mean, if you read Gabriel's words to Mary, if you read Anna's words when he's brought to the temple for circumcision, when you read Simeon, if you read what we know was said to her, well, he will save his people from their sins. How's he doing that? Mary has no clue how that's supposed to happen.
Wouldn't this have also been, if not the first, a very early time that he had access to the scriptures?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
so he wouldn't have been, he would have just been like, your mom said this, but now he can ask the elders, what are the scriptures?
Yeah, exactly. He's in Jerusalem for the first time, and this is the seat of learning, because he's from up north Galilee. Nobody respects the Galileans. I mean, that's the backwater. Right? He's down in Jerusalem for the first time. This is where all the scholars are. And he wants to ask questions. Now, they're amazed. You got a 12-year-old kid who's really interested in these subjects, which is unusual. He's precocious, but it doesn't mean he has all the answers. As Luke says, he's growing in wisdom and stature. At the end of that story, he says he's growing in wisdom and stature. That's what Luke says at the end of the Jerusalem boyhood story. right?
As a mother of 5 children with one like that, trust me, it's very possible for you to be gone and missing one.
Yeah, my dad, who was a preacher, had stories about families with a large number of children driving home and discovering they'd left one at church.
Yes,
You know.
I've done that.
Where's that child? Still at church. Go back and get that child. Right? That's kind of what happened, right? But
They left me at church one time. Gone,
And
and
it was always the same one that was missing.
we had 2 cars and they each thought the other one had.
exactly, that's what can happen. That's what can happen. But see, what I'm suggesting
But that
is,
story was,
Yeah.
the reason I brought it
Right.
up, well, I mean, I know you were gonna go here, but, I mean, the relevance is, he's in that crowd later as he starts his ministry, and they're going like, that's the kid that everybody panicked, like, where is he?
right, yeah. We know the things he messed up on. That's the kid who's not a very good carpenter, even though that's the family. You know, I don't know what it is, right? But that's why they're despising him and not willing to view him as someone who can teach them wise things, is because they know him too well. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? It's the people who know you too well who can often never see you more than what you used to be when you were a teenager or something. They can never let you in their mind grow up because they remember those stories, right? So, but what I'm getting, my point is getting to, we have this need to see Jesus in very human terms. Because I think for all of us, we accept him as the Son of God and divine. And that's great. But if we don't have enough of a he was genuinely human kind of viewpoint, then the whole idea of being like him becomes impossible. Let me look up this verse real quick. This is what happens when I remember what the verse says, but I don't remember exactly where it is. It's 1 John 2:6. I think it's very important that I bring the receipts, right? To use that term. Well, 5 and 6. This is a verse that initially made me start rethinking everything, because I had this adverse reaction to this verse. Like, no fair. So here's the verse 5 and 6. But whoever keeps his word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked. And I read that and thought, impossible. God, not fair. Don't ask me to walk as he walked, right? Why not? You haven't given me what you gave him. If you give me what you gave him, I can walk as he walked. You know, because what did I imagine he'd been given? Well, he's all-knowing, he's all-powerful. You know, he never has to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow, because he always knows what's going to happen tomorrow. He knows what everyone's thinking. I mean, that's the way Jesus was presented to me. He knows what everyone's thoughts are. He knows everything is just going to transpire. He's, you know. And then the other problem is the verse that says, and he was tempted in all ways like as we are, Hebrews 4:15. That doesn't make any sense, because so many of my temptations come out of my limitations. And if you remove limitations, where are the temptations? Right? Why would I be tempted to do something foolish today if I know how everything's going to work out tomorrow? Right? Or if I actually have the power to make things work out. Right? If the power is like tingling in my fingertips and I can do whatever I want, well, how could anything tempt me? I can fix everything. Do you see what I'm saying? I had trouble with Hebrews 4:15. I had trouble with this verse. They seemed like they were false. There's no way that he was tempted like as I am. No way that you can ask me to walk like him. Unless, of course, the way I've been thinking about Jesus has been wrong. That's where I started thinking, wait a minute, maybe this imagination, what I would call the Jesus of the flannel graph, right? Sunday school, I went to, we had flannel graph Jesus, you know, and every Sunday on the flannel graph, he did all these things. And it gave me this imagination that he was Superman. He was not like me. I could admire him, but I could never imitate him. I could worship him, but I really couldn't follow him. Right? But he was never asking me to worship him. He's always asking me to follow him. Like John says, to walk as he walked. Well, if I really see Jesus as human, not denying the divinity, but saying he became human and experienced life just as I experienced it, with the same limitations, with the same things available to him as are available to me, then all of a sudden, his life as recorded in the Gospels becomes much more relevant to me. And it's not an impossibility for me to walk as he walked. Right? That making you follow my train of thought on that?
Yeah, and it's less discouraging when you know that God's calling us to be human, not divine.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. It's so, you know, the key verse is going to be Philippians 2:8, that he emptied himself and took on the form of a servant, though he was in the very form, though he had the very form of God, he did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. The Greek word is kenosis. And so the debate rages around, of what did he empty himself? I would say this. Generally, there's three great attributes of the divine. Omniscience, knowing everything. Omnipotence, power to do anything. And omnipresence, being everywhere all the time. Well, did he give up omnipresence?
Yes.
I think so. I think when he was the baby in the manger, he wasn't also in Galilee, and he certainly wasn't in the New World. He was there. So if he gave up omnipresence, and I don't know anyone who would argue he didn't, if he emptied himself of that divine attribute of omnipresence, why would we struggle to assume he also emptied himself of omniscience, so that he had to learn and he had to grow in wisdom? Otherwise, he's not experiencing life as the way I experience it. Does that you follow? See, again, I'm not undermining Jesus as divine. I'm simply saying something good can happen if we imagine Jesus as genuinely human, and that my experiences are exactly what he experienced. Some days he was worried about what was going to happen tomorrow or next week, and he did not know how it was going to work out. And what he did do was live by faith. He trusted in the love of his Father, which is available to me. I just don't do it enough. In other words, I came to realize I can do what he did if I would trust as he trusted. The problem is I don't trust my Father like he trusted his Father. Because that's what he did. He knew the Father loved him. Now, sometimes it seems like the Father had to kind of reinforce that, right? You're my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. I mean, there were indications where the Father was saying, good jobs. Why? Because he's not sure he's doing a good job. He doesn't know if he's really on the right track. So the Father's reassuring him. And the question is, does the Father ever reassure me? I think so. I just have to give myself over to trust in the Father's love, that he will always be with me, no matter what, as Jesus did. And I can experience that same sort of union with the Father and the same sort of life through the Son in the way in which he has lived life. Han?
You're throwing me back to when I was struggling to even become a Christian with the statements you just made. I get the omnipresence. Where I struggle is if you gave up all knowledge, and as a baby I get that. But then it's kind of leaving it up to Russian roulette as to whether or not he understands. You know, he's going to have to be in some environment that's going to produce.
Yes.
You know.
One with centuries of prophetic.
Yeah, I get it. And so he selected Mary, but then Joseph dies. We don't know when exactly.
Yeah.
I guess he was there at 12, but we don't know when Joseph died. So just the environment to learn
Yeah,
it seems very.
It's risky.
Challenging, yeah, seems very challenging. And I know you're, but I'm not laughing about this. I really struggled with that concept, and I'm not being ugly about you laughing about it, because I get where you're coming from on it, but it was really truly a real problem for me
right.
in
I get it.
trying to accept that Jesus is human, because it would seem to me then he's gonna be screwed up if you leave it to the devices of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son, born of a woman. I've often said if Jesus had been born in the Indus Valley at that time, he couldn't have grown up to be the Messiah, because there wasn't all the preparatory work of 800 years of prophetic material which had prepared. So as Paul, I'm quoting Paul, in the fullness of time, like when the time was just right, when God had done all this preparatory work of the Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Malachi and all this work, and John the Baptist, you know, what the confession that Paul's making is there was just this right time where God had laid all this preparatory work out so that the divine Son could become a human being and learn and grow, and that everything was there, right? And that the Father could, through the Spirit, enlighten people such as Simeon and Anna and Mary and who knows how many others. But I'm back to the point where I think this is helpful is I have to understand Jesus is living by faith. He's not walking by sight. Again, Paul says we walk by faith, not by sight. Was he walking by sight? That means he knows how everything's going to work out. Well, once again, if that's the case, I can admire him. I cannot follow him because I lack the sight. And in fact, Paul is saying I'm not even supposed to try and walk by sight. So what I have to start viewing is he's living a life of deep dependence because he does not know for certain anything. He has to trust it. He has to trust the words of his mother, because I think probably some other people thought she was crazy, but he trusted her, right? He trusted what was said about him. He trusted it. Could he sit there and go, I don't know. I don't even know if I want this. Do you think that ran through his mind? Whatever this means, I don't even know if is this really what I'm called to? Is this who I am? I don't feel like this is who I am. I don't feel special. Did he feel special? I mean, I kind of bring it up joking. You know, did he remember being in heaven with angels? No, I don't think so, because he's a human being, right? He's a human being. And sometimes do we not doubt God's calling for us? Was he tempted in all ways like as we are, yet without sin? Did he have the capacity to go, I just don't know if I'm really this promised person who's supposed to redeem my people. I don't even know if I want this responsibility. I didn't know what to do. And when I asked the rabbis, there's about 14 different opinions of what this means. Some think I'm supposed to lead an army to kick out the Romans, and some think I'm supposed to be a spiritual healer, and some, you know, he had a real dilemma. It's not like there wasn't any ideas, there were too many ideas about who he was supposed to be.
Great.
But I'm just trying to make this earthy and real so that we can walk away going, wow, I really admire Jesus, and what I admire about him is faith. It's his faith that saves us. It's him doing by faith what then, he does not ask me to do something he has not already done. He's not saying, Greg, have lots of faith. Of course, when I lived life on earth, man, I didn't have to trust anything because I knew everything. And I had all the power in the world, so it was easy for me. But I want you to have faith. That's a poor leader who asks you to do things that he or she themselves have not done. But if the way I'm encouraging us to look at it is, he did all of this, right? With no more resources than are available to me, because the resource of faith is always available, even though I don't like it, which is means I got to trust where I don't know, and I got to walk where I can't see. And that's always a possibility. I'm always looking for alternatives. Right? Give me a way I can know, give me a way I can see. I don't like this faith business of having to trust. Okay?
And the other thing that's encouraging to me is we've all talked about playing the Jesus card, or, all that kind of stuff that makes Jesus hard to follow. It helps me reimagine of, I probably had unrealistic expectations of what is it for Jesus to live this perfect life? The perfection of his life was in that trusting. It was in that abiding. It wasn't a sin for him to worry. It was not a sin for him. The humanity was a feature, not a bug, right? I mean,
Yes, yeah.
inhabiting space and time and limited knowledge was the setup, right? And so the only thing you can do is sort of live in trust and live in abiding. And when you're having all those other things that I would almost, that traditionally growing up, I would have gone, gosh, obviously that's a sin, right? No, you can wrestle with things while abiding in God.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that point a lot, because it's like when we read the Sermon on the Mount and he says, do not worry about tomorrow. And you're like, easy for you to say, right? Or is it like, no, I've done a fair amount of that and I realize there's no point in it, right? Is he talking from experience, or is he kind of mocking all of us with advice that doesn't apply to him? Judge not that you be not judged. Well, has he ever really been tempted to judge? Did he really ever find, you know what, I'm focusing on what's in someone else's eye rather than what I need to do for myself? Now, again, I'm not suggesting sin, but I am suggesting real temptation, not fakey temptation. Like, if you don't have those thoughts, then you aren't tempted, right? If you don't start going down a certain path and then back off, you aren't tempted, right? So, again, I think this is what, to me, the Gospels are presenting, is the shocking reality that God became one of us, thoroughly one of us, experienced everything we experienced, which means he experienced the worry, he experienced the lust, the pride, he experienced it all. The thought about, you know what, I'm better than all these people. And then to go, now wait a minute, where am I? The love of his Father backing him off of that position. But he had to have the thought. If he didn't have the thought, he was never tempted. So, that's where this becomes much more like, oh, I'm not being asked to do the impossible. I'm being asked to live into what God has already done in Christ. Knowing that his perfect doing it has already swept me up. Like, I don't have to get it right. He's already done it. But now I'm just living into it just for the joy of it, just for the what it brings me in terms of bettering my own experience of life. Not because I got to get something right to make God happy, but because it's now, he's taken all the pressure off. He's already done it, and I'm in Christ, and it can't be added to. And he's given that, his life of faith and obedience to me as a gift, his righteousness, which I don't have that kind of righteousness. He's already given it as a gift. So now I, with great abandon, can just go and do my best, not worrying that I can screw it up. And I can actually try and walk as he walked. Because nothing's riding on the line of like, well, if you don't get it right, you're doomed. Nobody lives with a kind of abandon of faith in the best sort of way if you're so worried that anything could lead to you losing out. Then you're afraid to make any move, right? But that's not where we are. He's done it all. It's completely done for us. Now, so with great man, I heard this one illustration, it was at Trace Diaz way back. One of the other spiritual directors, one where I was a spiritual director, used the analogy of when the football game is like 49-7 and the coach puts you in and you're the winning team, you can play your heart out, right? Because there's no way you can lose the game. There's only 10 minutes left, right? So you're not the most talented player, but you can get out there on the field and go for everything because you can't lose. And I like the analogy, right? It's like when we see ourselves as we can't lose, so go play your heart out, go for the impossible throw and the impossible catch, you're not going to lose the game. The game's over, but you're getting into play. And you just want to play. See, I think that was a good analogy. That's why I remembered all these years later. It's good analogy.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, so you said something a few minutes ago that's just a cascade of thoughts. So I was asked by a non-believer, why was Jesus male? And I didn't have a good answer. And,
Some questions
and
don't have good
well,
answers.
but maybe this is it, all right. And so I'd always had this belief that Jesus would have turned into Jesus no matter what time or place God had plopped him into, right? But you said.
I'm not sure.
Oh, all right, okay. But no, I don't believe that now. I'm just,
Right.
It's evolving, right? Like
Yeah.
a cascade of questions.
Right, right.
So the next thing is, okay, you said that you think God had all these conditions available for him at this time in this place, that this human baby would turn into the Jesus that we know.
Right.
And one of those conditions is the preeminence of men. He would have had access to the temple and the other things that a male would have. And we're like, it kind of makes a little sense there.
Yeah,
That one of those
sure.
conditions that was just right was
Yeah,
he had to be
I mean, to that question that the person raised, and they could read into it some sort of male superiority or something.
Yeah,
Which, of course, I don't believe in the least. Eve was deceived, not Adam, which means Adam ate knowing full and well what he's doing. That does not make Adam a better spiritual person. That makes him a worse spiritual person. Because at least she can say, I got fooled. Adam's like, well, I didn't get fooled, I just did it. Who do you admire most? I admire the one who didn't knowingly do it, right? So these classic arguments that I grew up with, the kind of the innate spiritual superiority of males, I find them to be woefully illogical. Yeah, woefully. So I can understand how someone could be saying, yeah, that's the problem, is it's this male patriarchal kind of thing. But there is a truth that in almost any culture, almost any time, there is a privilege to being male. So, but that's to follow Jesus' example, he did not answer every question he was asked. And I found the freedom of not doing that either.
But it's still in the back of my head. Yeah. Okay.
Well, he only had two choices.
Yeah,
It's a binary choice, right?
yeah,
It wasn't like he had a third.
yeah, so, yeah.
But the timing, when you look at Jesus' arrival, Greek philosophy, if you look from a timing perspective, I think you can kind of say, okay, well, that was a good time. And then I've never thought about, of course, you have that, 800 years of kind of setting.
And I'm just basically going from Elijah.
Yeah.
You can go
So-
back further than that. I'm just going for the problem.
Yeah, well, all the time,
Yeah.
go back to Adam.
Right.
But two thoughts that maybe, because maybe some other folks are struggling with the same thing, and I appreciate your commentary on it. But one is from C.S. Lewis, which was, and all of the Gospels confirm this, he either was the biggest charlatan that ever was, period, stop, end, or he was who he said he was. And,
Right.
and there's, and then you talked about too, the infinite versus we're not infinite, we're finite. And so for the finite to understand the infinite is also an impossible journey on that.
Right.
And then, thirdly, I guess, back to C.S. Lewis, which really was kind of the answer to what I asked you about earlier, is, the Trinity. I don't understand the Trinity. I don't understand how part of the
Yeah, sure.
Trinity emptied itself and became this baby in the manger. And so,
Right.
just accept that I can't ever understand that. I may not understand that in heaven, you said to me the other day, but I want to know that answer. Not in heaven. But those three guiding thoughts are where I can feel better about the deity of Jesus, but yet the humanness of Jesus. And I do think the Father, however, again, that works, I don't understand with the Trinity, but you know, he started affirming him. We don't have any, at least I don't remember, but maybe somebody can, you know, any specific, like Gabriel coming to him saying, yeah, you're the man. You know, there's not that. But what he did get towards the end was, you know, in the garden, they saw him with Elijah and Moses.
Yeah.
And, you know, so there was something.
There's two incidents. There's at his baptism, and a voice speaks from heaven, you are my beloved son. Before he's done anything ministry-wise. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, which is towards the end, and the same thing is basically affirmed. So, you know, I only go from what our canonical Gospels give me. You know, we could speculate, well, there were more incidents. Perhaps, I don't know. Those are the only ones I got to go with. But to me, that does seem affirming. You are, and why does anyone need affirming? Unless they're not sure. I mean, again, if I'm sure, I don't need affirming. It's just theater. We're just pretending like I need affirming. And the words then are not meaningful. They're meaningful because I don't know. I'm about to launch on a ministry that I've decided has this direction to it. At least, however, he had decided by that point what direction it would take. And that's a pretty risky thing to do, especially when consensus of opinion does not agree that that's necessarily what you're supposed to do. So I think what amazes me about Jesus, one of the things, is that he came to an understanding of what it meant for him to be the Messiah, and I'm not sure that anybody supported his viewpoint. I don't know that anybody read the suffering servant Psalms in Isaiah, or read Psalm 22, or read, particularly like Isaiah 53, and took from it what evidently he was taking from it. And I don't know that anyone else read Jonah and said, you know what? I think I'm fated to be in the ground for 3 days. Who else was interpreting Jonah that way? The sign of Jonah. He multiple times he points that out. You'll get the sign of Jonah. So somehow he's read that story, seen it as a metaphor for his own death, burial, and resurrection, that the Father won't let him see corruption. He's pulling that from Psalm 22. How did he bring that all together when I don't know that anybody else was putting it together that way? And that is incredibly risky. And that means it was an act of faith to say, basically, Father, if I'm getting this wrong, you better correct me, because I'm by faith stepping out this way. Correct me if I'm mistakenly.
Because everybody's telling him, you're going to be Zeus.
Well, yeah.
You're going to
Or you're kicking out the Romans, or you're this wise teacher, or you're the new king of Israel. Where did he get the idea? You know, so it's just amazing. But that emphasizes so much more his faith. He trusted. But isn't that what we do? We launch out going, God, if I'm wrong, you better help me, because I'm as faithful as I know how, I'm taking this step. And I could be wrong. Why? Because I know I don't know everything. But if I'm wrong, please redirect my steps in the right way. That's where we live life, right? You'll never know beyond a shadow of a doubt, right, about life decisions. You'll always go, I don't know if this is the best decision. You're going to have to make one anyway, right? And you don't know. But then when you say, but Jesus lived in that space, and it's like, oh, he does understand. We do have a high priest who understands, because he was tempted in all ways like as we are. So he knows what it's like when you don't know for sure, and you're risking it all on a job or a move I mean, we've got a friend who looked like was a great job, and then in short order they terminate him. I mean, it's just shocking, as much as they wanted him, you know. And you're like, he's got to be asking, well, didn't I pray about this? Didn't I? You know, but that's because we don't know what's going to happen, right? Anyway, obviously I didn't get to Jesus' bad days, but I kind of got this feeling I better lay a lot more groundwork before we get to how we can see Jesus having a bad day and not go, oh my, he must not be the Son of God if he had a bad day. Oh, no, he's a human being. Human beings have bad days. Having a bad day is not necessarily sinful. It depends on what you do when you're having a bad day. Right? So we are going to get through Jesus having bad days. All right, we'll stop.